I once provided project management support to a country office in Ethiopia for a conflict response. When I received the final report for this project, I found something surprising. There was this question on the donor template: what difference did the project make to affected population? And as an answer, my Ethiopian colleague simply wrote, "It created hope for the community members." I laughed at it and told them they should change their answer. We're not supposed to say our projects gave hope. But later on, I thought about it. Well, what if it did give hope to the affected community? Isn't that an impact worthy to be reported? It occurred to me that the way we do project management in the aid sector, not just at reporting stage, but also at proposal, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation, is problematic. It is not designed with local values, knowledge, and experience at the heart of it. And this matters because we've all committed to lofty ideas like localization and shifting the power. But how are we going to make these happen if our day-to-day tools and ways of working are not fit for purpose? This is why I think it's time to decolonize project management. In the 1970s, USAID looked into the way they implemented projects. They thought their in-country teams didn't really know what they were doing, and that the teams focused too much on inputs that often did not translate into the outcomes they wanted. The recommendation: follow the military's approach of logical planning. Thus, the very first log frame was born. But what really struck me was this. They invented the log frame to pursue American objectives, not with the locals' interest in mind. And ever since, we've followed this military-style logical planning in our sector. Experts know best, experts make decisions, and the experts' objectives, not the locals, are fulfilled. So how could we change this? My name is Arbie Baguios, and I'm a Program Quality and Accountability Specialist at ActionAid by day, and in my spare time, I also recently founded Aid Reimagined, an initiative to radically reimagine the way we do aid. And so I've thought about this a lot, and I want to suggest 4 principles. These aren't new concepts, but taken all together, these offer a framework for decolonizing project management. First, fund courageously. There are 2 problems here. 1, funding mechanisms incentivize gaming the system, like submitting perfect proposals that aren't actually based on local needs or context. And 2, funding is not easily accessible to those who are often the most effective actors, local organizations. To solve this, donors must have the courage to accept uncertainty and messiness in humanitarian response and rely less on perfect proposals that have to be submitted on strict templates and timelines. And INGOs that are often sub-grantors must also have the courage to invest in local partners to make it easier for them to apply for funding independently, instead of sometimes stomping our feet when it comes to sharing indirect cost recoveries or funding core costs. Second, trust generously. It's funny how in some job descriptions, a Prince 2 certificate is considered desirable. PRINCE stands for Projects in Controlled Environments. But in aid, we don't operate in controlled environments. We operate amidst complexity. And there's evidence that to be successful in project management in complex environments, we need to trust more. The economist Daniel Honig studied 14,000 aid projects and found that they were more successful when implementation and decision-making were delegated to the local staff. He says, project success relies on local staff's freedom to navigate by judgment, making use of local, contextually bound information that is difficult to include in a report or an email to headquarters. Given this, perhaps it's also time to see more local and national staff at Northern headquarters as decision makers. Third, measure differently. USAID's problem 50 years ago is still our problem today. Sometimes we focus too much on inputs that do not necessarily lead to our desired outcomes. But beyond this, we should also question our self-appointed authority in choosing what outcomes to pursue, or even our confidence of pursuing ambitious outcomes within our relatively small sphere of influence within people's lives. So at reporting and evaluation stage, is there space for what local communities value, like hope or happiness? There are already some approaches that incorporate this, such as most significant change or outcome harvesting. Or even more radically, as others suggest, perhaps we should stop using measures for evaluation altogether. Lastly, be a bridge, not an expert. If we keep imposing our, frankly, Western-centric project management standards onto local people and staff, we will always see them as lacking in capacity. I've experienced this firsthand. I come from the Philippines and have sat in meetings in London where they talk about the lack of capacity in my country. But this just doesn't match the reality I know, where there is an abundance of capable, motivated people with no shortage of skills and good ideas, like Joel, who we have heard from before. So there is capacity, but perhaps because of global historical inequalities, there may not always be resources, or the capacity is not always in places you'd expect to find. The task, therefore, is not to assume the lack of expertise, but to find them and connect colleagues to the resources and power they need to implement successful projects, which turns capacity building into capacity bridging. So how does this look like in practice? I know I'm biased, but an example that I could give is our humanitarian work at ActionAid, which is not defined by our specialty in a particular sector like food or health, but by this thing we call our humanitarian signature, where we focus on women's leadership, accountability, and shifting the power. And based on this, we've managed projects in a way that applies some of the principles I've mentioned, like providing funds directly to women-led organizations for disaster response, or like working with other agencies to help develop a capacity strengthening framework that doesn't assume a lack of capacity, but builds on existing ones. We've come a long way since the 70s, and of course, there have been huge progress in the way we do project management. And yet, the military-style, expert-led, log frame approach continues to haunt us. But if we fund courageously, trust generously, measure differently, and be a bridge instead of an expert, then maybe we can begin to decolonize project management and put local values, knowledge, and experience at the heart of our work. Thank you.